Get on the train before it leaves the station. The truth train is coming, gonna run them down, run them down.
Hello everybody, how you doing? So today we're here. Gotta say I'm gonna be probably making some videos about some stories in Missouri in the coming weeks, folks, just because of what happened yesterday. Yesterday on May 19th, the state of Missouri executed Walter Barton, who it looks as though he may have been innocent. There's a very good chance. At least they could have stayed the execution long enough to look into it, and chose not to do that. So because they showed such careless, decision making yesterday, I was over on the Innocence Project tooling around and found Lamar Johnson there, who you guys have heard because Ricky Kidd, you guys have seen on my channel and on Tracy's channel over on Scales of Justice and everything. He's him and Lamar Johnson are friends, so I was looking a little bit into Lamar Johnson's case here, and I just thought it was amazing as I was reading it, like some of the similarities of what I already know about Walter Barton's case. But this has an interesting thing. I'm very happy for Lamar because he has a Missouri, a St. Louis, prosecutor actually championing his case right now because her conviction integrity unit turned this up and everything, and so he's actually got a prosecutor that's trying to advance this. So he's petitioned to the Supreme Court, and I believe, so far as I can tell on the Midwest Innocence Project site, there's no posting of a decision on that, so I imagine it's still pending. So anyways, I'm going to show you here today an article or two about Lamar's case, and then I'll probably talk a little bit about Walter Barton again, because I want to go ahead and tweet this video and the other ones I'm going to make about other cases that are similar in Missouri. I would like everybody who's watching this and who really cares and who is really hurt by Governor Parsons' callous disregard, to tweet these videos at Governor Parsons, post them on his Facebook page, whatever it takes. Let's just spend a couple weeks, a month, 2 months maybe, not letting Governor Parson forget about this, which is what I figure he hoped he would be doing when he did nothing about it. He figured once Walter was gone and out of the picture that this would all go away. I want you and I and everybody to make that not happen. I want him to not get what he wanted. So maybe you guys can help me out with that. Here we go. We're going to go into looking at an article here talking about the problems in Lamar Johnson's case. Here we go. Okay, this is a article about Lamar Johnson from the Washington Post. So here it begins. The state's theory stretched the physical limits of the human body somehow on the night of October 30th of 1994. Lamar Johnson left his friend's apartment, traveled 3 miles to Marcus Boyd's front porch with one other man, killed Boyd, fled on foot, and arrived back at the apartment to continue socializing with his friends, all in no more than 5 minutes. Now, the St. Louis Circuit Attorney's Office says it knows how prosecutors managed to convince a jury it was true. Police and prosecutors made up evidence, according to a 67-page motion seeking to vacate Johnson's first-degree murder conviction and grant him a new trial after 24 years behind bars. The accompanying investigative report, made public this week, describes a staggering amount of misconduct on the part of homicide detectives and prosecutors that convicted Johnson and sent him to prison for life with no possibility of parole. And authorities did all of this, investigators found, in the face of overwhelming evidence that Johnson was an innocent man. He has insisted on his innocence the entire time he has been behind bars. The violation of Johnson's constitutional rights enabled the state of Missouri to obtain a conviction and sentence to life without possibility of parole against Johnson despite overwhelming evidence of innocence. The Circuit Attorney's Office wrote, "The undisclosed secret payments to the sole eyewitness in a case that was undeniably thin fatally undermines the reliability of the verdict." The case is a striking example of how serious misconduct by law enforcement can be brought to the surface by a conviction integrity unit, which progressive district attorneys' offices across the country have set up to investigate potential wrongful convictions. In this case, St. Louis Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner created the unit with the help of a federal grant in December and in partnership with the Midwest Innocence Project, which had already been working on Johnson's case since 2008. In the report, the unit describes the evolution of the police investigation as a series of circumstances that are alarming and offend the most basic notions of fairness and justice. By contrast, the trial prosecutor, Dwight Warren, who is no longer with the office, described the report as nonsense. Oh, what do you know? A prosecutor who claims that anybody that says there's something wrong with one of his old cases and he says it's nonsense? I'm shocked. Oh, wow, I've never seen that before. Anyway, the investigation into Johnson's case found that single homicide detective Joseph Nickerson authored 4 false police reports describing possible motives for Johnson to kill Boyd, such as that Johnson had a drug beef with Boyd. Years later, all 4 witnesses would review the reports and swear under oath that they never said what Nickerson attributed to them. The only eyewitness, Greg Elking, failed to identify Johnson several times before pointing to him at trial. He would be paid more than $4,000 for his cooperation, payments not discovered until the CIU's investigation in 2019. The men actually responsible for killing Boyd in a botched robbery would reveal themselves much sooner. They confessed as early as 1996 and 2002, saying in sworn affidavits that Johnson was not involved. Johnson continued to languish in prison anyway. "I know Lamar Johnson is innocent of that crime because I was there, and Lamar Johnson was not there," the confessor, shooter, James Howard, stated 17 years ago. The homicide investigation seemed poisoned from the start, investigators found. Before police even interviewed the sole witness, police already wrote down the name of a prime suspect, Johnson. The intel appeared based on little more than a hunch from the victim's girlfriend. She had told police she couldn't see the killer's faces. They were wearing ski masks. Full facial covering ski masks, folks. Just keep that in mind. Around 9 p.m., the night of the shooting, they had ambushed the porch where Boyd was sitting with Elking, who had come to pay a small drug debt. Presented with a photo array of suspects, Elking told Nickerson he never saw the shooters' faces either, but Nickerson told him that if he cooperated as a witness, the state would help his family financially. Elking agreed. He did not positively identify Johnson, saying only that his eyes looked familiar in the police report. However, Nickerson wrote that Elking did identify him, a fabrication he used to support an arrest warrant for Johnson, the investigation found. Immediately after his arrest, Johnson explained his alibi to Nickerson, insisting he was with his girlfriend at their friend's apartment and that there were phone records to prove it. Curiously, a second detective, Ralph Campbell, interviewed Johnson just minutes after Nickerson and claimed in a police report that Johnson made a cryptic confession, claiming Johnson said he let the white guy live, in reference to Elking. The Conviction Integrity Unit believes this confession was fabricated too. I have no doubt of it. The CIU does not believe that Johnson volunteered a confession to Detective Campbell after he denied involvement at arrest. During questioning throughout trial and for over 24 years thereafter, prosecutors wrote. Police never investigated his alibi, the investigation found. Instead, they put him into a photo lineup and hauled Elking in to ID him. On the way to the station, Nickerson told him that Johnson was believed to be responsible for a number of unsolved homicides in the city. and so Elking's cooperation was critical to providing justice for Boyd and his family, according to the report. Elking failed 3 times to identify Johnson, and yet still, this was not the end of Elking's cooperation. In the elevator, police wrote in a report, Elking confided in Nickerson that he wanted to do the right thing, but that he was scared and needed time to think about what I should do. The police report states that Elking then admitted he lied about the previous wrong identifications and now was ready to make the right ID. Oh, God. He allegedly then chose Johnson and Phil Campbell, the co-defendant who confessed. Years later, first in a confessional to his pastor and then to prosecutors, Elking would explain that Nickerson gave him the answers and that he went along out of fear, a guilt that weighed on his conscience until 2003 when he told his pastor he had to lift it. I regret not coming to you or anyone else sooner, he wrote. I don't believe it was the right thing to do then, and more so now. On Elking's false ID alone, bolstered by Nickerson's false reports from witnesses on a possible motive and a jailhouse informant who had incentive to lie, a jury convicted Johnson in July of 1995. Remarkably, prosecutors did not dispute his alibi. They simply argued that in the 5 minutes Johnson left the apartment, he had time to travel 3 miles to Boyd's home, kill him, and then come back. No. Folks. No. Okay, look, I'll tell you, when I was a wrestler in high school, when we were all, on the team, we were all young men, between the ages of, 15 and 18. And when it took at least 5 minutes to run 1 mile, there's no way you're running 6. Okay? I mean, unless Lamar Johnson is like a world-class athlete, hopped up on all kinds of some kind of performance-enhancing drugs, there's no way that's getting done. So, yeah. Anyways, okay, so just my thoughts on that. Despite all of this, Johnson lost at 6 appeals in the state and federal courts, even when Johnson presented the 2 sworn affidavits from the confessed killers. Part of the problem was that St. Louis Circuit Attorney and St. Louis Police Department continued to block him from obtaining information. When he filed an open records request in 2009 seeking any payments the circuit attorney or police department made to witnesses, he was told there was no records. So they were hiding it from him, folks. Hey, sound familiar? Like hiding ledgers and pages of the CASO report? I'm just saying, anyway. In fact, the Conviction Integrity Unit found 63 pages of information about the secret arrangement, plus a handwritten ledger describing more than a dozen payments totaling $4,241, apparently to fund housing and moving expenses. The payments began on November 4th of 1994, 5 days after the shooting, and the very first day Nickerson interviewed Elking. The documentation in the state's file describes Elking as an essential witness, and the CIU agrees. Prosecutors wrote in the investigative report, without Elking, there was no case against Johnson. The St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Attempts to reach Nickerson and Warren were unsuccessful. The motion for a new trial filed Monday, makes clear that prosecutors consider Johnson an innocent man and do not intend to retry Johnson for murder should a judge grant the motion. The unit said it tracked down some of the old jurors in Johnson's case, presenting them with the findings. All of them said they would never have convicted him had they known the facts. Really? All of them even? That's good. I'm hoping we're going to see that door swinging open for Lamar pretty soon, because it looks pretty darn convincing that he is an innocent man. On Tuesday, the Midwest Innocence Project said in a statement that it praises Circuit Attorney Gardner and the CIU for their work to correct an injustice. Oh, 100% on that one. I love to see prosecutors, wanting to be a part of setting things right, just as much as they are in seeking, to put bad people away. I like to see them, using the same, fervor, the same, diligence in trying to correct mistakes. So I do like that very much, and I agree with the Midwest Innocence Project on that 100%. After more than 20 years, said Patricia Bushnell, Executive Director of the Midwest Innocence Project, the system is finally being held accountable for its failures in Lamar Johnson's case. And hopefully it will, because I believe he has a writ of certiorari pending with SCOTUS at the moment. So okay, so that's the first article I have for Lamar Johnson there. Interesting, right? You see the things they're pointing out. It's pretty ridiculous. And there seems to be a lot of meat on that bone there, that Lamar is very much innocent. So I'm really looking forward to that getting, worked out, because it does look like Lamar was made a victim in a similar way that Walter Barton was. So what I'm going to move into now is the next bit for Lamar Johnson's case, and this is the part that everybody can actually kind of maybe feel a little bit better for him, because he has a prosecutor there in Missouri that's actually on board with the fact that the prosecutors were absolutely violating his constitutional rights when they convicted him, and so she's actually trying to she's actually trying to get his case dismissed, and once she can get the courts to dismiss it and everything, she can then drop the charges, and that'll be the end of it, right? So that's what she's trying to do. So I'm going to go ahead and show you an article right now real quick about her, so that you guys can be aware of the efforts that she's making on Lamar's behalf, which I think are stellar, because I always like to see a prosecutor out there who's doing the right thing as well, who's out there trying to make sure that we aren't putting innocent people in prison. Alrighty, St. Louis prosecutors are seeking a new trial for a man now serving a life sentence for murder after an internal investigation found authorities fabricated evidence and paid a key witness. The request for a new trial, filed last week, comes after St. Louis Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner created a conviction integrity unit that took another look at the case against Lamar Allen Johnson. Gardner is one of several prosecutors around the U.S. who has been elected in recent years while promising criminal justice reform. Johnson, 45, was convicted in 1995 and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the death of Marcus Boyd. Police and St. Louis prosecutors at the time alleged that he and the co-defendant Philip Campbell fatally shot Boyd over a fight about drug dealing. Campbell and another man who confessed to his role in the slaying, James Howard, have since signed sworn affidavits stating that Johnson was not involved. According to a report from Gardner's office, police pressured the only eyewitness to identify Johnson in a lineup, even though the two shooters wore masks that covered most of their faces. The witness took back his identification in a 2003 letter to his pastor. Police also promised to help the witness move to St. Louis County and gave him more than $4,000 for moving expenses, the report says. The violation of Johnson's constitutional rights enabled the state of Missouri to obtain a conviction and sentence of life without the possibility of parole against Johnson, despite overwhelming evidence of innocence, attorneys for Gardner's office wrote in their request for a new trial. Gardner spokeswoman Susan Ryan said because Johnson has already been convicted, the office cannot move to dismiss charges against him until a new trial is opened. Dwight Warren, the assistant circuit attorney who prosecuted the case, told the St. Louis Post-Dispatch that Gardner's motion is nonsense. Warren retired from after Gardner's election in 2016. St. Louis police spokesman Sergeant Keith Barrett, in an email, said the agency does not comment on pending litigation. A hearing on the request for a new trial is set for August 1st. This is in 2019, by the way, folks. Campbell was sentenced to a 7-year prison term for voluntary manslaughter. Howard was never charged. Those are the two guys that actually committed the crime. Lamar Johnson was not involved in the death of Marcus Boyd, Howard wrote in an excerpt from an affidavit included in the report. I know Lamar Johnson is innocent of that crime because I was there and Lamar Johnson was not there. So, interesting stuff. All right, so that's some of the story of Lamar Johnson. I'm going to post the articles down below. I'm going to post a couple other ones for you guys, for those that might be interested. So, it's obviously, like I said, Lamar Johnson is somebody Ricky was close with when he was wrongfully incarcerated and wrongfully imprisoned and convicted. And so when he was in there, him and Lamar, were friends with each other. And so, you've heard Ricky talk about Lamar, but obviously, I'm showing you now Lamar's in Missouri. And Missouri is where yesterday, on May 19th, 2020, they killed, Walter Barton. And like I said, it wasn't like we were asking for, it's not like the request that was being made was extraordinary. It was asking for a temporary stay so that an investigation could look into the claims that were being made and what was being uncovered. It's just a sensible thing to do. But no. Governor Parson decided to put his blinders on and plow forward. And that's what he did. And I'm sure he thought by doing that this would all just go away and it wouldn't be a headache for him. I hope everybody out there is going to help me make it a headache for him. Somebody said that he will be coming up for re-election later on this year. So, I think the voters should know that he had plenty of cause to question the conviction of Walter Barton, and Governor Parsons put his blinders on and plowed forward and callously disregarded all of the warnings that he was receiving. So I think the voters should know that, and they can make the decision that they feel is appropriate at that time, but I think they should know. So that's what we're going to try to do, I hope. I know I've got Jane Sharp, I know Lil Misty, and I know Linda Kay and Sharon and others are going to be right there with me with this and retweeting and doing all that stuff, and that's good. Try to go over and post it on his Facebook page, this video. Post, messages classy, folks. Remember to keep it classy. I'm not looking for, we're not looking for a reputation of being jerks who use foul language and say nasty things. That's not the reputation we're looking for. We are asking that we're just going to reasonably state that we were asking for something very reasonable, and that they temporarily stayed the execution to look into what had been turned up. It wasn't a lot to ask. It really wouldn't have hurt anything. So the fact that it was ignored is troubling, shocking, sad, very sad, because it's just, so callous to not even be able to bother himself to take a look. And it's not like Walter Barton's case had issues. It's not like it's an isolated problem. It's not. There's multiple cases in Missouri that have the problems. That's why I'm going to be showing them to you, folks. And that's why we're going to be continuing to show this to Governor Parson in Missouri. So I hope you folks are with me. Let's get these things in his face. Like I said, he was probably hoping that this would all go away and that Walter Barton wouldn't be a headache for him anymore. Please, folks, help me make that not a reality. Let's make Walter Barton a headache for Governor Parson for some time to come. Okay? All right, folks. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe, and we'll see you.